Namaste and welcome to the first Vichar Manthan event of the year for Manchester, where we are exploring the topic of the rise of veganism, a moral imperative or a European fad. My name is Hari and I am your host today. Vichar Manthan, or VM for short, is an independent voluntary organization which engages in open dialogue with members of society and institutions. VM explores issues facing modern British society through a Hindu civilization lens. Vichar Manthan is a phrase in Sanskrit, which means the churning of ideas or thoughts. VM is built around the idea that by earnestly exploring the toughest challenges facing British society through varying viewpoints, we can, each of us, churn out some deeper insight. VM currently has 5 chapters across the country, and there are many volunteers who give their time, skill, and money to make these events happen. Without further ado, let me introduce tonight's chair. Our chair this evening is Zimaji, who has a background in retail marketing and has been part of the VM team since infancy, when its first chapter launched in Leicester. Zimaji also has a keen interest in yoga, meditation, and Ayurveda. Thank you, and enjoy tonight's VM.
What I'm going to do is firstly introduce our speakers, and I'll share the structure of today's Vichar Manthan. I'm really excited about this Vichar Manthan and the questions that we have from the audience and the discussion from our panel. It's a topic very close to my heart, very interested in it, so really quite looking forward to it. So let me start with Dr. Joanne Mccormick. Was a family doctor for 23 years. She now helps people who want to improve their nutrition via group support meetings, and her website, which is fatismyfriend.co.uk. And she's also the founder of an organization called PHC UK, which I'm sure she'll share more about. It may surprise you that she's also helped launch a campaign in January called Organuary. And this is, from my understanding, encouraging those who eat meat to also venture into eating organ meat, and that will be something I would love to explore this evening. To my far right, I've got Dina Ahern. Dina is a UK-based animal rights advocate. Having been vegan for approximately 11 years, and an activist and advocate for about 5 years. She is also a solicitor, but at the moment not practicing. She teaches law at university and delivers corporate legal training in various industry sectors. She is also the conveyor of the SAVE movement, a worldwide animal rights organization whose aim is to bear witness to animals going to slaughterhouses. Dina gives talks all over the country about the realities of meat and dairy industry, and has also worked within the Hindu community, providing education on the realities of the dairy industry. And we've also got Dr. Leela Dengham. She's a doctor turned plant-based nutritionist. She received her medical degree from the University of Vienna and completed her internship here in the UK. Her personal experiences overcoming a health challenge through diet shift has shifted her professional interests as well, now focusing on the power of nutrition. After earning an eCornell's plant-based nutrition certificate, she's transitioned to a whole food plant-based diet herself. She's decided to obtain her master's degree in clinical and public health nutrition at the University College of London. And as a registered nutritionist with a deep understanding of the relationship between diet and health, Leela has helped others optimize their health and well-being, and helping prevent illnesses and living a healthier lifestyle. So I'd like to welcome our panel and the journey they've made from all parts of the UK to be here today. The structure this evening is we're going to hear from our speakers. Each of them are going to have roughly 10 minutes to give their opening remarks. We'll follow by approximately 20 minutes with a month-on with myself on some of the reading I've done and after their initial remarks. I'll then open it up to the audience for their questions. So you've got papers and pens in front of you throughout the next 45 minutes. Just feel free to write your questions down. And if the questions are not relating to what we've spoken here, but it's something that you really want to ask, please do so. If I feel it's appropriate to answer, we'll go for it. If not, I will allow you to speak to the speakers at the end. And we'll then lead into the closing remarks for each of our speakers and end there. So we're going to start with Dina first, who's got approximately 10 minutes to share her views.
Thank you, Zima ji, and namaste to everybody. Thank you to Vichar Manthan for inviting me to talk here today, and thanks to my fellow panelists as well. Let me first just start off with providing you with a definition of what veganism is. The definition I've taken from the Vegan Society, and it was put together in around 1945 by its co-founder, Donald Watson, who was in fact from Leicester. Veganism is a way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible, as far as is practicable, any form of exploitation and cruelty to animals for the use of food, clothing, or any other purpose. Now, I mentioned that this particular definition was coined in and around 1945, but veganism has in fact, or at least the ethos of it, has been practiced for far longer than that. In fact, for thousands of years, and I'll elaborate on that. There are areas geographically around the world known as blue zones. There are approximately 5 that we're aware of, and these geographical areas in and around the world are home to some of the world's oldest and healthiest people. The one thing that they all have in common is that they all follow and consume a predominantly plant-based diet. I say that the ethos of veganism has been practiced for thousands of years because for the Hindus in this room, let us not forget that the rishis, the munis, the sages that wrote our sacred scriptures, our shastras, the hermits who left their normal lives and went to the forests and the foothill of the Himalayas, they also consumed, and it's well known that they consumed a predominantly plant-based diet, only consuming the milk of a cow whom they'd lovingly milked by hand and whom they treated as a member of the family. But coming back to the topic of today, is veganism a fad or is it a moral imperative? Let me just ask you one question, and of course just ask yourself this. I won't ask you all to raise your hands. I want you to ask yourself whether you believe whether inflicting unnecessary suffering is wrong. And I'll repeat that again. Is inflicting unnecessary suffering wrong? And just sit with that and see where your moral compass, where your mind goes in terms of the answer. If you believe that inflicting unnecessary suffering is wrong, then of course veganism has to be a moral imperative. Now, I emphasize the word unnecessary, and the reason I use that word unnecessary because it's operative in this case. The American Dietetic Association and the British Dietetic Association, and I'm sure my panelists may elaborate on this, but both associations who are home to the world's top nutritionists and dietitians, both confirm that a plant-based vegan diet is absolutely adequate for all stages of life. That includes pregnancy and lactation. So therefore, if both dietetic associations confirm this, then of course, isn't veganism the only way to go? We also have an abundance of vegan foods in supermarket aisles, and for those who are well versed with Indian culinary skills, most of our Indian food is naturally vegan as well. And of course, with Indian spices, we can make anything tasty. But let me just also carry on with the topic to hand. We kill over 150 billion, I'll say that again, 150 billion farmed land animals globally every single year. Okay, that's 150 billion. In fact, just in the last 2.5 minutes or so that I've spoken, we've already killed 10,174 pigs. They were gassed and killed for food. We've already killed in the last 2.5 minutes 3,761 sheep. They were electrocuted and killed for food. Just in the last 2.5 minutes, we've already killed 2,094 cows who were electrocuted with a captive bolt gun to the head and killed for food. That's just in the last 2 and a bit minutes that I've spoken. But let me again elaborate why I think that veganism must be a moral imperative. Let me talk about speciesism. Now, the definition as provided by the American Oxford Dictionary of speciesism is the assumption of human superiority leading to the exploitation of animals. Basically, in other words, it's akin to sexism and racism. Okay, so there's no moral difference between, say, a dog and a chicken. Both have the capability to feel pain, both have the capability to suffer, and yet because of speciesism, we have actually placed more moral value upon the dog than we have upon the chicken. Now, as human beings, as moral human beings, and there's this idea that we are for some reason on the top of the food chain and we have enhanced cognitive abilities, as moral human beings, surely we owe it to these animals to end this form of discrimination, just as our predecessors did for other forms of discrimination hundreds of years ago. In fact, if you walked out onto the street of Manchester today, well, don't do it today because obviously there's nobody out there, but maybe, next week, if you were to walk out there and you were to ask the question to a stranger that, what are your thoughts on discriminating somebody against their sex or gender or religion, they think that that would be absurd in this day and age. But if you ask that same question, say, 50 to 100 years ago, you might have actually got a very different answer. Another key component as to why I think veganism has to be a moral imperative is to recognize the topic of sentience. Now, the ability to perceive, the ability to be self-aware, to have subjective consciousness, our research confirms that animals and humans alike are sentient beings. In fact, there's irrefutable scientific evidence to suggest this, to the extent that the legislation in this country recognizes animals as sentient beings. So if we, as moral human beings, acknowledge the sentience of these beings, on top of the fact that it's unnecessary to kill them, on top of the fact that, we're talking about moral duty, where does our moral compass lie, then it is a moral imperative to be vegan. I do want to add, though, that I am differentiating here between veganism and not vegetarianism. Because if you do obviously consume dairy and eggs, then unfortunately you are contributing and condoning the violence that happens in these very industries. For example, with dairy, a cow, for her to provide us with milk in the modern dairy industry, she has to be pregnant. For her to be pregnant in the modern dairy industry, she is artificially inseminated, which basically is an arm that goes up into her rectum, where the farmer feels for the neck of her cervix. With his other hand, he'll get an artificial insemination gun, and he will inject the semen of the bull, whom he has artificially masturbated as well, to make her pregnant. She will be pregnant, she will bear calf for 9 months, like the human mother, after which she's given birth. Her calf will be separated from her within 24 to 48 hours on most standard modern dairy farms. She'll go through this repeated cycle of artificial insemination, forced pregnancy, separation of calf, which induces enormous amounts of psychological trauma to both cow and calf. She'll go through this cycle over and over again, and her average lifespan, which if she was living in her natural circumstance and her natural surroundings would be 20 to 25 years, in the modern day dairy industry it is reduced to only 5 to 6 years. And then she is sent off to the same slaughterhouse where beef cows go to, where her male calf would have gone to because he would have been a byproduct of the dairy industry. So I am talking about veganism being the moral imperative and absolutely not vegetarianism. Let me also just touch upon the topic of, is it just a fad? Let me discuss some or share some figures with you. Veganism Veganuary, you might have heard, we've just had Veganuary. Just for this year, 2020, we had 370,000 people sign up. For last year, 2019, we had 250,000 people sign up. For 2018, we had 170,000, and for 2017, we had 50,000. Vegan food is everywhere. Supermarket aisles are actually introducing dedicated plant-based food aisles just for this particular choice of being vegan. There's a lot more consumer awareness of where animals come from and the environmental, health, and ethical impact of consuming animals has. Almost 1 in 4 products launched in the UK last year were actually vegan. And according to a recent Mintel report, sales of meat-free foods have grown 40% to an estimated £816 million last year. Also, if you look at Google, it's a hot topic. The top 3 most searched questions on the topic in the UK ask what veganism is, how sustainable is it, and how it affects climate change. And let's talk briefly about climate change as well, because the climate is crying out for a change. The United Nations, as well as the top scientists in and around the world, are all saying to us quite clearly that if we are to help the climate shift with its rising temperatures, we have to significantly reduce our meat and dairy intake. And then let me just finish off by finally touching upon where we as Hindus in the room stand with veganism and animal rights. At the core of Hinduism, we have the concept of Ahimsa. We're all aware of what Ahimsa means, but for those of you who might not be aware, Ahimsa is the concept of causing no harm, of doing no harm to all beings. Now, our sacred scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita, for example, talks about being immersed in the well-being of all beings. It says, Sarva Bhuta Hiterata, be immersed in the well-being of all beings. That's not human beings, it's all beings, which includes animals, it includes plants, it includes the trees. In fact, compassion is the highest quality praised in the Gita and in the Yajurveda. And compassion isn't blind adherence to customs and rituals, but it's a dynamic energy. It's an energy which looks at the context and the situation that we have today in the present time. Our Hindu teachings teach us to respect all beings, human beings, animals, trees, rivers, mountains, plants. In fact, you may be aware, before we construct anything, we actually do a Bhumi Puja, where we actually ask for forgiveness for taking the habitat from the land and for animals and to evoke the blessings of Bhumi Devi. Numerous Hindu organizations have also signed the Hindu Declaration on Climate Change. So adding all these points together, the teaching of our Shastras, the climate crying out for a change, the suffering and the plight of the animals and the unnecessary killing of them, Hinduism and veganism, they go hand in hand. Thank you and namaste.
Joanne, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. So my name is Joanne Mccormick, and I was a GP for 23 years in one place near here. And certainly the first speaker has made me pause for thought and think about how to respond, because I see a great variety of people in my work. And now I work with groups, but I work with individuals in groups. So I help people to improve their health. And I see that veganism is interpreted in many ways across society. So if I think about an individual person who came in, who was very unhealthy, very overweight, grossly obese, with hormonal problems, she was a vegan. And I would say she was a very unhealthy vegan. And it's very possible to be a very unhealthy vegan, pescatarian, meat eater, or whatever. But I find that there's a general belief that if one becomes a vegan, one becomes healthy. Now this lady, you could say she was more of a fruitarian than a general vegan, but she drank a lot of fruit smoothies. So she had what we call metabolic syndrome. She had high blood pressure. Her periods had stopped. She had facial hair. She was very unhealthy indeed. But I do find it's a problem when people adopt that sort of lifestyle. If they think any veganism will do, it won't. And I was speaking to our other panellist about ranges that have been brought out by supermarkets, which are plant-based foods or vegan foods, vegan aisles, vegan sections of supermarkets, and they tend to be composed of vegan processed food. And I think a lot of people in the healthy vegan community recognise this is a big problem. So I just wanted to touch on that. Now, I've made a few short notes, really, just about prompts. So our last speaker was talking about the environment, and I'd like to make a point about the soil. So if, as when I was a child, farmers had a few animals and they used them for themselves, and they had a diverse farm and they rotated their crops, the soil kept in good condition and they could naturally enrich the soil. But in the soil are lots of little creatures. Something like in a tablespoon there are about 1 million living organisms. And modern farming destroys those. So if all the fields in the world were converted to crops, there would be a problem. And I don't know how we can get around that. But if everybody in the world became a vegan, then there wouldn't be the crop rotation using animal manure, and that would be a big issue. I'm also concerned about killing, the moral of killing all those organisms, killing all the species. In a square metre of soil, I'm told there are 1,000 different species. So what happens to those species? And then if I get back to humans, because I deal with humans, I don't deal with soil. Apparently, if a person eats junk food for 2 weeks, half the species in their gut disappear. So we're not just one organism, we're actually an ecosystem composed of trillions of different organisms plus us. And half of those organisms disappear if we eat junk food for 2 weeks. Now, if somebody changes to a vegan diet, and it's a whole food vegan diet, they're going to enrich the gut. But if they change to a vegan diet, which is things like pasties and pies and biscuits and cakes, then they lose half their species. Now that's a problem to me. You see, I was brought up to think. I was actually brought up in Northern Ireland, and I lived on a farm a lot of the time. I actually wandered in and out of the sheds if the animals were there in the winter, in and out of the fields if the animals were there in the summer. And I saw how farming could be done well. My grandfather had a farm which had, I think, 4 cows, quite a lot of chickens, quite a lot of ducks, maybe 1 or 2 pigs, fields with a few potatoes on them, and fields with cabbages. So it was quite a diverse farm. And I saw over the years how my grandfather's farm was taken over by people who wanted to just grow 1 or 2 crops and just concentrate on beef cattle. And so instead of just making enough food for themselves, they actually made food that got changed into potatoes that were changed into crisps. So they changed something that really was quite a staple, and a lot of Irish people live mainly on potatoes, and that was the problem with the potato famine going back 150 years. But potatoes are relatively nutritious, and back in the day they didn't use pesticides and they didn't use fertilizers, they just grew them, so it wasn't a problem. But now our modern farming methods are a major problem. Now, with the rise of veganism, a lot of people talk about the dreadful farming practices of the world, the most dreadful farming practices of the world, and I don't support those at all. I think they're absolutely abhorrent. And I think back to the farms of my childhood where people grew and looked after animals that they needed, that they needed to bring up their families. Both my parents were from families of 1 in 8, 1 in 9 children, and they wanted to feed them and maybe sell a little bit at market. But now I see farms where animals are mistreated, such as our first speaker indicated. And my answer isn't to stop using animals. My answer is to get back to traditional farming methods and think about doing things better. The next point I'd like to make is really about the human body and how veganism doesn't suit everybody. We're all different. So that's a very important point to me as a GP. not everybody suits being a vegan. So I do see people who have been vegans and their health, for whatever reason, suffers. Obviously, the lady who was obese and had metabolic syndrome, she was not following a healthy vegan diet. I could say to her, follow a healthier vegan diet, but she's stuck in bad habits. And maybe she can't afford the amount of vegetables and grains that are needed to actually keep her in health. But some people have problems. I'll give you one example. So some people can't absorb vitamin A very effectively from plants, and they can absorb it a lot more effectively from animals, animal products, I should say. So that would be an example of where I think people need to be mindful. And then say somebody who starts off with health problems. I mean, I was born with eczema. And I got asthma when I was a child. Now, people with autoimmune disease sometimes have a problem with eating a lot of vegetables. Now, that might be because they're not eating organic vegetables. It might be they're not peeling them properly. It might be that they've got traces of pesticide there. It might be something else we don't understand yet. But there's actually been a rise in the number of what I call meatarians, or they might call zero carb eaters, or they might call carnivores. So there's a very small movement of carnivores in the USA, and the numbers are around 20,000, so it's very small. But these people only do it for health reasons. And when I first heard about it, I thought they were bizarre, strange, wacky, weird, and I wondered what on earth why they would do it. But one day a doctor wrote to me, who was one of the carnivores, and he wrote me a very long letter. It probably ran to about 3-4 pages of A4. And he was telling me how he didn't know what was wrong with vegetables, but there was something wrong for him. He said it may not apply to other people, but he told me at the time that 20,000 people in the US were practicing this. So the most famous person who does this, who has an autoimmune disease, is called Michaela Patterson. And she's the daughter of a very outspoken professor. And she had very severe autoimmune disease as a young woman. And so her health has improved a lot on a meat-only diet. So that's another example of a person. It may be small print, but certainly there are a certain number of people with autoimmune disease who turn to veganism. There's certainly others who turn to veganism first, and then they change from that to eventually being carnivores, which is very unusual. Now, another person I'd like to just talk about briefly, if you just remind me, how many minutes have I got left? 2 minutes left. So very briefly, I just want to give the example of somebody called Lierre Keith, who's written a book called The Vegetarian Myth. Now, she was actually a vegan whose health suffered. Now, just as an example, I'm not saying that everybody needs to consider this, but she was a young woman whose health did suffer very considerably when she became a vegan for quite a number of years. Now, what my observation is that at first, if people are following a standard Western diet and they go onto a whole food vegan diet, their health improves enormously. And they are often very, very pleased with the results. And that may continue forever. I haven't yet met a vegan who's in their 90s, but they will exist. But this young woman called Lierre Keith actually became very ill with things like degenerative spine disease, hypoglycemia, depression, anxiety, to name a few. And she gradually went back to having a healthier omnivore diet. Not to say eating an awful lot of meat necessarily, but giving it a place in the diet just from a nutritional point of view. The final person is somebody called Teri Walls, who got multiple sclerosis. And Teri is a doctor who's doing research into this now. And she worked out that she needed more nutrients from her food, and that she wanted to recover from her multiple sclerosis through eating more nutrients. And she realized she had to eat vast volumes of her vegan food to actually recover, but that she needed much smaller volumes if she ate things like organ meats and meat and fish to actually recover. And she maintains that some people genetically just aren't as suited to being vegans as other people, which sounds to me reasonable enough. So that's it. Thanks very much for listening, everybody. And I'll just pass you on to our chair.
We're going to quickly move on to Leah so we can get some questions in.
Hello. Hi, thank you. Thank you for everybody for being here. Well, I'm actually an ethical vegan, so I'm like Dina. And for me, just being vegan, I'm just for the animals. But here I'm actually as a health professional, as a nutritionist. So I'm going to talk about the nutrition aspect, the health benefits. And I know we talk about veganism, but a lot of people go actually adopt a vegan diet for environmental or health reasons. And they usually call it plant-based. So I might actually use the same terminology, say plant-based rather than vegan, because I'm talking about the health benefits. And a lot of people actually, when they adopt a plant-based diet, they are not necessarily vegan, because veganism is about not using animal products, so not using leather, not using fur, so not harming animals in any way at all. And we know, Dina just touched on the blue zones population, and we know that, from the epidemiological studies, that your diet only needs to be 90 to 95% healthy for you to actually have a healthy life. Now, so that could mean that, you could just be 90 to 95% plant-based, and the rest you could have junk food, animal products, and you could still be healthy. And, but let's look at some data. 30% of the population in the UK is obese, and a further 35% is overweight. And 1 in 6 people have diabetes, and 90% of those people have type 2 diabetes. And we know type 2 diabetes is linked with diet and lifestyle. And I should have actually probably started with heart disease, which is the #1 killer in the UK. And what is really shocking is that these numbers are, across all the countries. Like, obesity is actually on the rise in countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. And those are countries where you find people underweight and overweight. So we are having actually the double burden of malnutrition. So on the one hand, you have all these people who are starving. They are just not getting enough food. So they are actually deficient in micronutrients because of lack of food. And then you have all those people who are over-consuming. And just because the underweight people, it is just lack of staple food. So we are not really talking about expensive food. There is this myth that a vegan diet, a plant-based diet, is expensive. And I'm sure if there are a lot of British Asians here, so you appreciate that actually legumes, grains, they're actually among the cheapest foods. So actually some of the healthiest foods are also the cheapest foods available. And so we actually, I'm not talking about the animal rights issues, Dina has covered that. We are actually facing a health crisis across the globe. And add to that the climate crisis we are facing at the moment. I'm sure all of you are aware of it. And there is the world hunger. So we have all these issues, and we could actually address all of those issues with a plant-based diet. And last year, the Eat Lancet report was released, which was written by 37 experts from 16 different countries. And we are talking about non-vegans. So none of them was like kind of, a vegan expert on veganism writing that report. One of them is Professor Walter Willett, who is actually non-vegan. I have met him. But the Eat Lancet report said that actually if we want to feed all the population of the globe, and which is good and healthy and sustainable, then we should adopt a plant-based diet. So they have this plate, which they call it a planetary diet plate. And when you look at it, half of it is vegetables, then the rest are like kind of grains, legumes, nuts. Just a small portion is animal products. So that is actually the food which could be sustainable. And if we all eat like that, per year there would be 11 million less deaths across the globe. So that is quite a lot. And I think, when you look at, first of all, I don't think that any human being, I have studied nutrition and medicine, none of us needs animal products to be healthy. And we can get all the nutrients from a plant-based diet. Yes, plant-based diet and not a vegan diet, because I'm not talking about a junk food vegan diet. And it is so easy to eat junk food. And I think what happens is that actually a lot of omnivores, they are eating junk food as well, and they are lacking nutrients, and they are just not aware of it. I work in the community. I work with people who are not vegans, and I see that every day. And when I start telling them, just to adopt a little bit more plants, include more into the diet, their health improves. So you can't really deny that. And I personally, I believe that actually we are so focused on carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, whereas we should focus on the macronutrients. Where are we getting our calcium? Are we getting enough calcium? Are we getting enough iron? So all of these macronutrients, the minerals and vitamins, nobody talks about that. And once you change that in your diet, you'll be surprised how your health improves. I had health problems. That is why I had actually to quit medicine. And a whole food plant-based diet helped me. And I have seen that with so many people, with autoimmune disease. A lot of the problems we have, health problems, the cause is inflammation. And inflammation, that is actually caused by animal products, not by, plant foods. In fact, plant foods are actually anti-inflammatory. So that is why, a lot of athletes, I don't know if any of you has watched the Game Changers, a lot of athletes, professional athletes actually adopt a plant-based diet because exercise is an inflammatory event. It causes oxidative stress. And when you have a plant-based diet, you get all these anti-inflammatory compounds, all these antioxidants. That helps you to recover faster. And that helps you to be a healthy athlete and do better in your chosen sport. And the same applies to general population. So for me, I used to be a doctor. I took the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. And even as a nutritionist, I think it is my ethical responsibility to actually tell people that animal products are not good for your health. If you want to be healthy, you need to adopt a plant-based diet.
I'm going to go straight into questions I have, and then we'll open it up to the audience. This one's for Joanne. Joanne, you mentioned several instances or cases where eating meat has helped people with illnesses actually reverse that illness.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. I mean, I must say, I'll go through that. So I'm very interested in what you said about, animal products being inflammatory. And the interesting thing for me is that they're not inflammatory for everybody. I mean, when I first heard of a person adopting a meat-based diet, completely meat and absolutely nothing else, I thought they were nuts. And I thought, who on earth would do that? Just a crazy person. But actually, for some people, especially if it's organic and they eat what's called nose to tail. So we had a campaign last month, if you are going to eat meat, eat organ meat because it's the most nutritious bit of the animal and the animal's dying anyway, which might seem cruel to people who are ethical vegans. But some people, when they eat like that, they get less inflammation. And they're giving up a totally junk food diet, going on to a diet like that, which is, say, grass-fed lamb, and maybe just drinking water and not having any processed products at all. So it's a totally different kettle of fish to an omnivore who eats burgers and, eats a bit of everything. These are people who adopt an extreme diet to try and reduce inflammation. And if it doesn't reduce inflammation, they stop doing it. But I actually advocate a diet that's not too dissimilar to what you two advocate, albeit what I say is that I don't make any judgment about whether people adopt a vegan, pescatarian, meat-based diet, but I suggest that their diet's mainly vegetables and that any fish or eggs or meat is a sort of a garnish in very small volume, partly through cost and partly because there's less inflammation if you have less animal products. So I recognize that a lot of nutrients come out of animal products. But through this diet I've just described, which most of my patients will adopt their own version of. People have completely reversed diabetes to the extent they've gone from a very severe diabetic to being a diabetic completely in remission with normal blood tests and no drugs, which I think is absolutely phenomenal, fabulous. One of our guys, he lost 8 stone in a year, so he's gone from, that'd be 22 stone down to 14, fabulous. And a lot of people come off a lot of medication. So that's improving their diet.
Sorry, just to go on there is a general consensus within scientists that meat does increase the risk of cancer, like of colon cancer, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes. And then on the contrary, you've shared some instances where it's reversed it in some patients. 95% of all the meat that is consumed, it's indoor industrial warehouses, factory farming, where animals are bred on corn, wheat, soya, of which 3.4% is free range, farming, and 1% of then the whole meat industry is organic. So with such a growth or the focus of factory farming, how can that surely be a source of nutrients? And isn't it actually causing potential more harm in one's body in order to cure another illness? So
I'm not sure I completely understand your question, but I think what you're saying is that obviously there's a lot of evidence that eating meat is associated with higher incidence of cancer, for instance. When you pull the statistics to pieces, nutritional studies are, one could draw different conclusions. In particular, red meat's usually lumped together with processed meat in studies, and a lot of studies are drawn from memory about what people have eaten. And I suppose what I'm saying is that I go back to individuals. So today I went shopping, and I tried to buy just organic. In terms of vegetables and meat. And it's true that free range is more available than organic. It's also true that I still go to the farm where my grandfather, which he'd set up obviously many years ago. And those animals are virtually all grass-fed. They'll be over 90% grass-fed. And that's the way to go, to try and, obviously, if people are going to eat meat, to actually try and get organic and try and get local. And try and get us, that way they will get more nutrients. But I work with people. I work with people across the whole range of socioeconomic groups, and so a lot of my patients can't afford the more expensive meats and eggs and so on. Like I say, I do tend to, where people have got an open mind to eating all sorts of foods, I do suggest that it is mainly plant-based with a garnish of meat or fish, and obviously, and then if they're buying a much smaller volume of meat or fish, then they could afford the best quality possible. I think the world's got to get away from this dreadful situation with these horrible food lots. I've watched Cowspiracy, for instance, and I've watched other films which show the horrors of animal farming, and it's abhorrent to me too. But I suppose because I was brought up with these tiny farms in Ireland, and I know they still have, they do still live on grass and drink rainwater and get lots of space outside to run about. That's what sticks in my mind, and that's the sort of meat. That's where I'd like my animals to come from, rather than the farm.
Can I just add something to that? Anybody who changes their diet, even if it is like an omnivore diet, vegan diet, whenever you change your diet, most people, that means that, especially if you're not doing it for animals, even if you're doing it for animals, because I have some private, vegan clients, at some point you start, people ask you a question about your nutrition, so you get into that kind of mindset to learn more about it. So what I'm trying to say is, each time whenever somebody changes their diet, they get actually kind of a healthier lifestyle. So even if they are turning carnivore, all that, completely carnivore, they are not eating junk food, and they are probably exercising more. So yes, for a short time, they get better, but we don't have long-term studies. And I think that is really important. Yes, studies in nutrition are really difficult because it is memory, it is, people's memories are biased, we forget, but that is why population studies are important. And we have seen, the Blue Zones populations tell us that, actually, if you eat 90 to 95% plant-based, that is the healthiest diet. You are healthy, you are more active, your brain cognitive function is better, and you live longer. And I think, what is happening at the moment, there are a lot of people, almost like a backlash against veganism. They are trying the carnivore diet. And I think we just don't have any long-term studies. But in a few years' time, we are going to see the results. And, just one more thing about type 2 diabetes. Yes, each time you lose weight, your type 2 diabetes is going to get better. But if you don't change your diet, if you're still eating a lot of fat, because type 2 diabetes is caused by fat, not by sugar, what like most people believe. So yes, then, if you don't change your diet, at some point it is going to come back. And I think that is it. Short term, yes, a lot of diets will, show results, but we are talking about long-term health benefits.
Thank you. I'm going to quickly move on to some
Can I just
questions. if we
Yeah,
can have this
okay.
conversation
Yeah.
after this month, but I've got quite a few questions, and I know the audience would like to open it up as well. But Dina, I know you're itching to contribute to this discussion, but I've got something, a different perspective based on your opening speech. You made reference to the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna. He's known as Gopala, Govindraj, Nand Gopal, the beloved cowherd, Makanchor, Vishnu. Again, he's a Vishnu avatar. He's seen dancing with a peacock feather in his mukut. How do we understand, how does the Hindu community understand Krishna when he's got a peacock feather in his mukut, he's there with cows, consuming dairy, and obviously we worship him. So how does the Hindu community understand veganism in that light?
Thanks. That's such an important question, particularly because this is a Vichar Manthan platform, and of course there are many Hindus here at the moment. I mean, the pictures that we all have of Krishna Bhagavan, Lord Krishna, in our mandirs, they're beautiful. Picture them now. You see Krishna Bhagavan, Lord Krishna, he's there with a herd of cows, lush green fields. He has a flute in his hand. He has as Zima ji has said, he has the peacock feather on his crown. What a beautiful image. And then you compare that to the picture of cows that have been grouped in their hundreds on some of these mega farms, and in fact the majority of farms in the UK are mega farms where they are grouped together in sheds, often not seeing daylight at all. They are fed grain and soy, and those that are on organic farms, legally the farmer is only allowed to let them out 6 months of the year. The rest of the other 6 months of the year they can be indoors in sheds. They're milked by machines, their babies are taken away. There is no milking by hand. There is no playing the flute to them. There is no taking them to the nicest pastures, for them to graze. There is no treating these cows like a family member. In fact, as soon as this cow or the calf is born, a clip is made to the ear with a tag, and that has a number. And the cow, the calf, is known as a number. It is known as property. In fact, legislation stipulates that animals, farmed animals, are property. They are not actual physical beings recognized. While some legislation, of course, recognizes that they are sentient beings, they're still legally classed as property under the Property Act. So, reference to Lord Krishna, of course, is symbolic of how cows were once perhaps treated. That no longer is the case in the East and the West, unless, of course, there is somebody here today who can tell me that in their back garden they've got a herd of cows whom they lovingly milk by hand. They don't drive cars, and perhaps they use their manure for energy, but I don't do that myself, and I highly doubt anybody here in the modern West and modern East does that as well. I also just very, very quickly wanted to touch upon what Joanne said about the smaller farms in Ireland and what you're used to, and I can really see why that seems to be a very appealing picture to paint, that, let's get away with these modern mega farms where animals are treated abhorrently, and let's go back to traditional farming methods where macro forms of farming were used. Firstly, I just want to ask you this question with regards to the farms that you were used to and that you were growing up with, and then the animals were treated with high welfare standards, I'm assuming.
Well, I would even go in and
if I can just finish the question.
Yeah, sure.
How did you kill them? Or how were they killed?
Yeah, how are they killed? So first of all, in the farms, when they're in the sheds in the winter, there's a lot of light because there are gaps.
But how were they killed,
Yeah,
Joanne?
so they're taken away from the farm, and they're taken to the slaughterhouse.
So they're still killed in the same ways as the mega farms.
Yeah.
That's the point I want to make. You can treat an animal as nicely as you want for, a few years. You can give the pig belly rubs because pigs love belly rubs, and you can really, really run your fingers through the wool of a sheep, but ultimately they are still getting a slit to the throat and they are hung upside down in a slaughterhouse. So thank you, Zima.
Thank you, Dina. I'm going to quickly move on to a question to Leela here. Interestingly, I've been a part of a marketing campaign through December and January and launch of a new range of vegan food at the place I work. And naturally, at the same time, I have to work with our contact center when our customers come back with questions about the products. And the common questions, this is probably speaking of a lot of members of the British Society, has been, the food is highly processed. This is vegan. This is a complete vegan range, labeled plant-based protein, completely processed. It has, the language uses likes of chicken, duck, and it's packaged completely in plastic, which predominantly is not recyclable. And I'm going to kind of tag two questions onto this one. Is at the same time, there is also claims that a vegan-based diet doesn't give you all the nutrients from a plant-based diet, likes of B12, creatine, vitamin D, iron, calcium. How does a vegan then get their optimum source of nutrients?
Okay, thank you. It's quite interesting. Yes, I agree. Vegan, the meat alternatives, they are still processed. I agree. But they're still actually slightly healthier than the animal products. And as far as the nutrients go, vitamin B12 is actually comes from the soil. So animals don't make it. It's actually added to their feed. So they are getting supplements. So it's almost like getting the supplements via the animals. So we just take supplements directly. And calcium, again, that comes from the soil. So animals eat the grass, they get it, and then we get it via the animal flesh. So why shouldn't we just get it directly from the plants? Plants are full of calcium. In fact, the calcium in milk, for example, there have been studies showing that, we talk about, calcium is so important for bones, but there have been studies showing that actually the population who drink a lot of milk, the risk of fracture is higher. And also it is associated with breast cancer. So this is quite important. The breast cancer rate is increasing. So, the calcium we are getting actually from dairy products is harmful, and that is something we should bear in mind. And again, iron, we get it from plants. Lentils are full of iron. And, when I was in India, what I really liked is that with every meal, they had a small bowl of dal. That is full of iron. That's how you get your iron, and so many other plants. I mean, the list is long. And the heme iron, heme means just blood. That is what you get, from animals, not from milk, not from eggs, just from, animal flesh. That is actually associated with increased risk of heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes. And I just think, when you can actually have all these nutrients from plants without the harmful effects on your health, without harming the animals, and in the process you're actually helping the environment, why wouldn't you do that? And yeah, that's it. You can get all the nutrients. And one more thing about what you mentioned, the vegan chicken, they are called. All of these processed alternative meats, they're actually designed so that to make it easier for people to transition. Because when we change, change is difficult. Who here has tried to change their lifestyle? Is it easy? No. So we just want to make change easier. And by having something which actually tastes exactly like what you are used to, what is familiar. I mean, studies have shown that we like foods that, we grow up with and which are familiar. So by making a burger just taste like meat, it makes it easier for people to transition, to try actually plant-based burgers. And then in the process, a lot of people later, they change. They actually get healthier. They actually eat a whole food plant-based diet rather than the processed, vegan diet.
Okay, thank you, Leela. One last question from me before we open it up to the audience. So get ready, you guys. Dina, this is a question to yourself. You mentioned Ahimsa. And I have read Patanjali Yoga Sutra and practice of Ashtanga Yoga, where one of the limbs to Ashtanga is the yamas and niyams, and a part of it is Ahimsa. Now, I have a big bugbear that yoga is just become asan practice, and Gyan has just become learning of shlokas, learning things at its surface, as opposed to really practicing what our scriptures are telling us. Now, there's a clear disconnect there between the Gyan and the practice of Gyan. How do you think we can address that within the Hindu community?
Very apt question, actually, and it's reminding me of a conversation that I had just absolutely very recently on Ahimsa. And, you know, what comes before Ahimsa is Karuna, and what comes before Karuna is Vidya. So Vidya is knowledge, and of course we can't have or partake in action without actually having the knowledge to work with, to dissect first. So once you have been instilled with the knowledge, in this case the realities of the meat and dairy industry, then you sit back and you wonder, well, what shall I do with it? And then comes Karuna, the compassion, and you extend that compassion, and with that comes the inevitable byproduct, the systematic eventual consequence is Ahimsa. And I absolutely agree. I think in the West, when it particularly comes to the practice of yoga, and I very much realized this when I was in India doing my yoga teacher training, and I don't even like saying that because I went to India to do yoga teacher training. I came back more of a student than before I went, because I went there and realized how little I actually knew, and just how much the West has reduced yoga to simply an asana practice, you know, the physical practice, and how yoga is so much more than that. And it is the practice of compassion. It is the practice of you know, incorporating and intertwining the knowledge that we have acquired into all aspects of our life, and actually, you know, sharing that with every single being. With the practice of veganism, and in fact one of the talks that I do is on the intimate link between yoga and veganism. In this day and age, and particularly for all of us who live in the West, where we've got supermarkets on every single corner, we've got the ability and the privilege to be able to choose whether we go to that aisle or whether we go to that aisle. We've got the privilege to be able to choose the blue cap milk, the red cap milk, the green cap milk, or move literally 10 steps forward and you'll see oat milk, soya milk, almond milk, cashew milk, hemp milk. And one has suffering attributed to it and the other one doesn't. Then that's where we use the knowledge of yoga and the practice of it in our choices and how we benefit the earth, who also Hindus also see as our mother, and who we, you know, also benefit the animals and plants and all beings.
Okay, thank you there, Dina. We're going to open up the questions to the audience.
Part of my question you actually asked already. So I have a family, apart from myself, we're all vegan. I'm nearly there. I'm vegetarian at the moment. The question I have is about the good vegan or healthy vegan aspect. And I think I see a role for yourself in it in terms of a nutritionist to be able to say to people like me that when I have a concern about the iron, or I have a concern about the level of calcium, or I have a concern about B12, all these things, how do I have a good vegan diet to be able to live well? So at the moment, the reason I'm not converting myself is I always think that all this stuff I'm going to miss out. And I think that's where the marketing and the concept of nutrition advice would come really handy. The other part of it is I'm trying to be a devil's advocate because I talk to a lot of people at work and at home about veganism. And the concept about Ahimsa in my view is not just the food, it's in thought as well. So when the animal rights or the veganism comes as a fundamental kind of argument, then people reject. So how do we turn that table round and make it so that it becomes Ahimsa in thought as well as in action in terms of the food? Those are the two questions.
Okay, so shall we address the first nutrition part?
Yes, I understand, and it is a very valid question. And there is a website, Plant-Based Health Professionals UK, and they have created, the NHS has the Eat Well guide, and they have created a plant-based version. And it is really, I like it because it is a plate, it is round, like, the plates we have at home, and it shows, how many vegetables should you have, how many fruits should you have, how many portions of legumes, and it really tells you also, like, kind of, what kind of supplements do you need. And you get a lot of information, how to actually be healthy vegan. And if you want to be a healthy vegan, you have to adopt a whole food plant-based diet rather than the junk food. Look at the blue zones populations. They live up to 100, even sometimes more. And there was actually a cardiologist who passed away, I think, 2 years ago, and he turned 103, and he had been vegan, I don't know, for 30, 40 years. So yes, there are vegans who are 90. And actually, again, Google Robert Chick, he has been vegan like more than 20 years. There are actually a lot of vegans. We just don't hear about them.
You both mentioned on the blue zone population, just for my understanding and the audience understanding, that these are pockets of community around the world, like where do they reside?
So the blue zones are geographical locations around the world. There's currently 5 that we know of, but scientists are discovering more. I've actually got a list of the ones that are in existence. Again, just to remind you, the blue zones are geographical locations which are home to some of the world's oldest and healthiest population. Okinawa in Japan, Loma Linda in California, Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, Ikaria is an island off Greece, and Ogliastra region in Sardinia. So those are the 5 that we're aware of. And I mean, just coming to your question, or the 2 questions that you posed, I think it's really important to say that, if anybody is thinking of actually going vegan, whilst I am an ethical vegan and I do it for the animals, I absolutely do not advocate that you walk out of this door thinking, gosh, I'm so moved by what's been said and I really want to help the animals, that's it, from tomorrow I'm vegan. What I do advocate is educate yourself, because you're more likely to sustain and maintain being a vegan, or at least a plant-based diet, which then extends to veganism, which extends to the clothes you wear, to the products that you use, the makeup that you use, the shoes that you wear, etc., etc. Educate yourself first so that you're equipped with that knowledge. When you go to your supermarket, you're not just at a loss of where do I go, and then you're more likely to then just go back to choosing what you normally did, and you very quickly forget about the ethical, health, and environmental implications. I'm talking about Ahimsa as well, and thought, which precedes action. I mean, I suppose personally speaking there, we've all got to take personal responsibility for our actions, but what comes before our action is the thought. On a larger scale, how can we have an impact there? How can we actually help the movement there? Hopefully one day we will have Dharma integrated into our policies and into our legislation in this country. We represent 0.8 of the population. I would like to see a time when we've got more Hindu Dharma practitioners who are, advocating for dharmic policies that talk about animal rights and not animal welfare. We don't want bigger cages, we want no cages. So, and of course with that, the thought will then come, post will come the action. But again, that's sort of looking at a larger scale there. All of us individually, if we've got the thoughts that we don't want to actually cause harm, then of course our actions should be able to be in congruence with that thought. Thank you.
Joanne, you'd like to contribute to this one?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, be very mindful. You're right. And I say this when people think about changing their lifestyle. Go out there and read about it. Think about it. Think about it, whether it's what's right for you, what's right for your family. Each of your family members needs to think about what's right for them, and do it properly. I mean, what really upsets me, I suppose, is say someone jumps on the bandwagon of being a vegan, and they may start off eating, like the pasties or chicken equivalents or whatever, and then they may progress on to having a lovely whole food diet, but they don't give up smoking, they drink an awful lot of alcohol, they go and take cocaine once a month. And what is the point? And that really annoys me. I just think, no, it's about a whole thing. And then onto the blue zones. The people in the blue zones live in wonderful communities. They're supportive, caring communities where they care about the environment and they live sustainably. And that's a world away from someone living in a basement flat in Japan with no contact with the outside world apart from when he goes to work and not seeing anybody, just going to a karaoke club and maybe drinking alcohol and being a vegan. That's just not going to really help that man's health that much. But, actually thinking about how you can create a supportive community around you, and how the final point is just being mindful about the effect of the vegan diet on you. Get advice from a nutritionist, because ultimately it might not quite suit you. Some of the people in the blue zones do eat meat or fish occasionally. It might only be once a month or something, or it might not be at all. But if your body needs the nutrients and it's not getting it from plant-based products, you've got to think, how much do I need of that plant? And it might be plants. You might need an awful lot more of certain sorts of plants or grains or whatever, but do go and see a dietitian and do it properly. Don't just assume that any old vegan diet will do for your body, because you're all unique individuals.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Questions?
Hi, I suppose this question is for you, Leela, since I'm interested in this from like a human health perspective. So the 2 points actually. The first thing is that the Eat, Land, Sit diet that you mentioned, I believe the World Health Organization had to remove their support of this diet because it was brought up that it was deficient in multiple micronutrients, including choline, B12, vitamin D, just to name a few. So my first question would be, if the greatest minds in the world, as it were to come together to create a planetary diet, if that is still deficient in key micronutrients, then what hope do we have of succeeding if everyone were to turn vegan overnight? And the second point was about type 2 diabetes. You said type 2 diabetes is caused by fat, not by sugar, and that losing weight is how you improve this, but there was a study from Ohio in America that showed that metabolic syndrome improves on a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet independent of weight loss. So I was just wondering where your thoughts around fat causing diabetes come from.
Thank you. First of all, yes, I agree. I mean, I know that they had to remove it, although I think it was more political rather than, because of the lack of the nutrients. The thing is, we are so used to getting a lot of our nutrients from, fortified sources, just because of the soil. I mean, we didn't actually touch on that the soil is not actually good enough anymore. So that's why a lot of the products we have is fortified. So we are so used to getting vitamin B12 actually via animals that we don't realize it is, as I said, it is from the soil, from the bacteria in the soil. So yes, that is why we need to have supplements. And a lot of, if you go to the Plant-Based Health Professionals UK, they have the guide, and they have added next to it vitamin B12 supplement. So just because they are aware of it, obviously, they are more aware of it than those people who were still adding a bit of animal products in it. And actually, when we talk about vitamin B12, there are a lot of people who cannot actually absorb vitamin B12. It is actually reduced in elderly, especially. So again, I think if you want to see a nutritionist, I would really highly recommend to see a plant-based nutritionist or dietitian, because I think we think differently. We are more aware of the nutrients which the vegan diet might actually lack, and vitamin B12 is one of them. So yes, when you go to vegan nutritionist websites, they all have the plate plus added vitamin B12 supplement. And vitamin D, again, we get it from sun. So it's not like it is in the food as such. And the NHS guidelines actually say that we all of us in this room, we should actually get vitamin D supplements again during the winter months. And I think these are the things like, that guide was for the globe. And some countries, they have enough sun, they have enough sunshine. They don't need to actually add that. And again, a lot of, vegan dietitians and nutritionists, they add that plus minus vitamin D supplement. So I think, you can get all the nutrients supplements, from a vegan plant-based diet. I do. I don't take any supplements, just vitamin D over winter months, and that is it. Now, that study, I don't know about this study, but what I can tell you is that low-carb diets, long-term, we don't have enough studies. Yes, short-term, we have a lot of studies, for 6 months, 12 months, they do show results, but we don't have enough long-term studies actually to show us, what is going to happen to the body if the diet is high in fat. And as with, type 2 diabetes, it is because of the intracellular lipids. It's in the cell. So, it is really about that level. And again, yes, short term, all of these diets, because they actually remove processed foods and they lose weight, yes, there is an improvement, but long term, we don't have any studies. And high fat, low carb diets were actually first, I'm sure you might be aware, actually, developed for children with epilepsy. So it was actually a diet to treat a disease, a condition. So a very difficult condition. So it isn't actually a healthy diet as such. And if you look at high carb diet, and when I talk about high carb, I mean like kind of unrefined, complex carbohydrates. When you look at the studies, all the studies actually show that that is the way to go. And especially again, with the athletes, you see that they need to have high carb diets. And they do so well. And I think if they can actually thrive on that diet, then the normal population can too as well. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to leave the conversation. You can pick up at the end. I just want to take a few more questions. Remember, when we're talking about veganism, we're talking about nutrition. We're talking about ethics, values, morals, Hindu dharma, the environment. I'd love to take some of your questions around that as well.
Thank you for the very interesting discussions. And my question is directed to either one of the doctors here. So this is based around particularly pregnancy and breastfeeding, but I think opens up a wider discussion here. On the NICE guidelines, but as well as directly on the NHS website, when we discuss or when we look up vegan with breastfeeding and pregnancy, the main advice is, take supplements for sure, B12 and vitamin D. But in tertiary care centers, I have firsthand seen, obstetrics and gynecologists directly discouraging patients from, being vegan during the duration of pregnancy. And that mindset of broadening a perspective of having a vegan diet with health still seems to be quite narrow amongst healthcare professionals. And in the upcoming, medical student education, the idea of nutritional education is just not emphasized enough. So how can we work towards overcoming those perceptions at a healthcare professional level? Not just limited to pregnancy and breastfeeding, but also the wider prospects of it.
Joanne, would you like to?
Yeah, sure. We've got a really big problem in this country. And I don't know whether you two guys would agree with me, but the dietary guidelines are wrong. They emphasize too much processed food. You would probably think they emphasize too much meat and dairy and so on, which is fine, because they are very, very biased. And so any nutrition education we had as medical students was by necessity very biased. And I'm ashamed to say that virtually every country in the world has got food processing companies on the committees who decide the dietary guidelines. And I think it's disgusting. It really is absolutely appalling. And the sooner that countries actually drop processed food companies like Coca-Cola and Kellogg's from the dietary guidance committees, the better. The committee in our country is called SACN. I think they should all be sacked. I really think so. I think they should think about the nutrition in food and the sustainability of food and not about increasing their profits. So that's the situation we started from. I'm a GP. I can't even remember the nutrition education. The only thing I remember from medical school was that there's a process called gluconeogenesis, and that's where your body can make sugar. And that's where you actually don't have to eat it. You can actually make sugar, so you don't have to eat the white stuff. Okay, and so when I speak to my patients, I talk about trying to eat real food, unprocessed food, and that food doesn't actually include alcohol, it doesn't include fizzy drinks, it doesn't include cordials, it doesn't include biscuits, cakes, sweets. It's real food, thinking about where you're going to get your fats from and your proteins, and if you are going to get energy, if you don't eat sweet foods, your body will make it. But yeah, we don't. And I would be a lot of people are nervous about low carb, high fat diets, but I'd say a vegan diet can be low carb, high fat. A vegetarian diet can be low carb, high fat. The fat, if you're fat, comes from your body. You don't have to eat it. And in terms of long-term evidence, the people in the blue zones have a very low carb, high fat diet in comparison with somebody who eats lots of cakes and biscuits and rubbish foods, rubbish Western food and burgers. So it's all relative. And yes, I'd be nervous about a vegan diet in a pregnant or breastfeeding woman. I would send her to a dietitian who was a specialist in vegan diets. You get women now who want to do low-carb, high-fat diets. If they're overweight, they don't need to eat a lot of fat. They can just eat real food. If they eat real food, it's going to be lower carb and higher fat. If they eat a vegan, whole food vegan diet, they will need supplements, just like people need vitamin B12 and vitamin D. But if they saw a dietitian, I would feel reasonably confident that they were going to be okay. But I still have concerns about brain development with children. There was something about the dietary guidance saying you could adopt a healthful vegan diet at any stage of life, and that obviously that statement would include infancy. I worry about brain development if people have a restricted diet, just about them doing it properly and well, and I would want them to have professional advice to make sure it was done properly and well. And I can understand why people err on the side of caution if they don't have dietitians who are specialist vegan dietitians. They might think, well, look, can't you just wait until your child's a bit older? But you've done it, haven't you? You've had at least one baby with a vegan diet, I presume.
Yeah. At least one. I mean,
as far as I know. Explain you were talking about your baby being
so
one.
So no, I do. I've actually just recently had a vegan pregnancy. So been vegan for 11 years. Had a full vegan pregnancy. Gave birth 12 months ago. He's just turned 1. He's a vegan baby. He's thriving. Exceeds his expected weight on these ridiculous, stupid percentile charts. And in terms of brain development, I do agree with Joanne. And in fact, this whole idea that, look, and I won't lie about it. I know unhealthy vegans. I know extremely healthy vegans. I know a whole load of unhealthy meat eaters and vegetarians, and I know healthy ones too. But let's not forget that, with the talk on nutrition, with the talk on health, we're doing that at the expense of sentient, living, breathing beings. These animals feel fear. They feel happiness. They feel love. They form attachments. All these animals have the ability to feel what we feel, and we're talking and focusing heavily on our health at the expense of their lives and at the expense of their suffering. If it means that you've got to have an extra handful of pulse, an extra cup of dal, or have that extra bit of, bhaji, spinach, then so be it. If that means you're not actually contributing to the suffering of other beings, but you've got to make that extra effort to have more plant-based foods and have that drop of B12, so be it. If it means you've got to get used to a whole range of plant-based milks for your masala chai because you're so used to having dairy milk and it takes you 3-4 days for your taste buds to adapt, so be it. At least then your conscience is clear that you're not contributing to the suffering, the killing of these innocent beings who have done nothing. They all want to live like you and I. But yet our taste, our habits, our cultures, our traditions end up dictating, what happens to them. So let's not forget this emphasis on health is at the expense of these sentient beings.
Add something because you were talking about pregnancy and breastfeeding. I used to work as a pediatrician before I quit medicine, and to be honest, if I could go back, I would go and apologize to every mom whom I actually recommended to give milk to their dairy product, to their children, because we know that actually dairy increases the risk of asthma, eczema, acne, and all these problems we see, and it is also increases the risk of problems later in life, obesity, and just because we have been doing it for years, for ages, we continue doing it and thinking, that is okay. It is not. To be honest, as I said, do no harm, and we are still doing harm. And I think, Dina is an example that it is possible. And I think just, health professionals, they are just not aware because they don't have the education. And actually, I know Pro-Veg and plant-based health professionals UK, we are trying to go to medical schools and actually educate, the students that, that is the way to go, that nutrition plays a role. I mean, we eat 3 times a day. We have 3 times a day the power of actually doing something for our health, our environment, and animals. Why wouldn't we do that?
You were talking about where people were vegan and they were on the diet,
yes,
and then they were so ill that they went back to meat and it cured them.
Yes.
I would like to know, and then it cured them short term, but I would like to know, leading up to that, you have to look in, were they eating too much bread, yeast? They may be eating too much saccharines in their food and things like that. So you have to really go back. And then, everybody is a different body type. And a lot of people know about Ayurveda, where you eat according to your body type. So a Kapha, Vata and Pitta, they eat different according to the body types, and Kappas have to have a lot of energy, and we have to have intensive exercises, whereas a Vata dosha, where it's very thin, they don't need that. So you eat according to your different body types, and it's also to do with your mental ability and things like this. So if I eat sugar, it's converted and I put on weight, so I have to stop that. And I can eat hot food, whereas a Vata dosha, if they eat hot food, it fuels their energy, so they have to go with that. So we have to eat according to our body type, and that's the way I think it should be explained.
Okay, thank you. We have a question at the back.
Thank you. This is a really interesting discussion. I just want to ask all 3 speakers very briefly, if they could. Let's suppose for a minute the utopian world all 3 of you in some sense are suggesting happened, i.e., Joanna, your case, people started to really treat their animals well and only started to eat organs instead of everything else. The 2 speakers are talking about promoting a vegan diet. Fine, let's suppose that the world, 80-90% of the world population became vegan. 2 questions I want to ask all of you in that context. One is, what happens to the animals then? Just what happens? I just want to know what the future looks like in your mind, in your imagination. And number 2, what happens to the land?
Okay, so in my utopian world, I accept that within that world, some people would continue to be vegan and vegetarian and pescatarian, and some would eat meat, and they would all eat quite a lot less of it, because that would make it more sustainable, and that animals would be treated a lot better, and people would eat local food rather than, say, importing avocados from Peru when the Peruvians need them, that sort of thing. So there'd be less air miles. In terms of what happened to the animals, there would be more use of animals to, fertilize the soil. I'm not sure. It's possible there might be less animals. I think that I don't know how it would work where people didn't travel, didn't have so many food miles, didn't have food crossing continents, when they could be grown in their or grown in their own country. If crops could be grown and animals could be produced in their own country and actually utilised locally, there would be less food flying about the world. Less cheese going from, say, New Zealand through to Britain, for instance. You said what would happen to the animals. I think there might be less of them. What would happen to the land? I suppose what's happening already is the land's getting is becoming more wild. You're getting more. Even the EU was encouraging people to leave more meadows fallow and to plant more wildflowers and hedgerows, and a lot of land is now used for leisure purposes in the UK, isn't it? With, say, railway tracks going back to use for cycling and walking and so on. So I guess a lot of the land would be left, like, say, bogs would be left as bogs and not dug up. So they're carbon sinks, aren't they? So that's a good thing. So a lot of the land would be used in that way to try and improve the environment and to improve the not just the environment for the sake of the earth, but also for people's usage.
Thank you, Joanne. Leela?
Well, I think if everybody would go vegan, we wouldn't breed animals to kill them. So there wouldn't be an overpopulation of animals. They would just be born and die naturally, but we wouldn't actually breed them. That is what is happening at the moment. That is how we are getting so many animals. So that is what, first of all, that is what happens to the animals. Then the land, I agree, it would probably go wild, and that would make a lot of changes. The air we breathe would actually improve. But more importantly, I think if everybody would go vegan, our health would improve. But the pharma industry would go bankrupt. A lot of doctors would actually go out of business because we would be healthier. And the risk of cancer, the rate of cancer, obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, you would be surprised. You would actually, I think we have taken all these aches and pains, we have, part of old age. It's not. Believe me, it is not, because I used to be one of those. I had headaches every single day. And once you don't have it, you just think, wow, this is possible? It is amazing. And I think that would happen. So.
Just to really echo what's already been said. We've got to remember, these animals wouldn't be in existence if there wasn't a demand for them. Farmers are not breeding animals where there's no demand for them. So it's a supply and demand, simple economics. And we're not all going to be going vegan overnight. So there's going to be a gradual process. And the less people demand animal flesh and their secretions, the less the farmers are going to be breeding them into their existence. But on top of that, these are domesticated farmed animals. They were never meant to be in existence in the first place. Just talking about our dairy cow, the Holstein Friesian dairy cow, the black and white cow that you see, that black and white cow is a maladaptation. It's a combination of two individual breeds that have been put together to increase milk yields, and that's to increase the heavy pocket of the farmer, which is, of course, heavier because of tax subsidies, by the way, but that's a different topic for another time. And in terms of what would happen to the land, so just to finish that first question, the animals, are not suddenly going to overrun the human population, because, they would slowly just gradually decrease as more and more vegans or more and more people become vegan. And in terms of what would happen to the land, well, gosh, it would go back to nature. We would start wilding the land that was always meant to be in its most natural state. We're facing the largest mass species extinction of the past 65 million years. So giving that land back and letting it rewild itself with wildlife to, populate the land that was once devoid of any benefits at all, with soil erosion, etc. We would just be benefiting the climate as well, because as Joanna said, by rewilding, we actually use, we actually create, and by having more trees, we're actually sucking out the carbon from the ozone layer. So we're actually, helping the planet there as well.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We're gonna, one more?
Questions about being attached to labels. So many of my vegetarian family, friends, they're attached to the label vegetarian. They're quite dedicated to being vegetarian and say, they never consume an animal. But that obviously we know through the dairy industry, through the egg industry, that there's still a lot of harming of animals that happens. So in the same way, as vegans, being attached to the term vegan, and thinking, okay, by being vegan, I'm not harming any animal in any form. So I'm going to come back to that in a second. And now, so I was watching something on Facebook last week, and it was about a guy in America somewhere who, for the last 3 years, has cooked his own food and basically sourced his own food, grown his own food, and ate his own food, cooked it outside in his and turned his lawn into lots of growing vegetables. So he hasn't bought anything, and it's quite admirable what he's done. And the way he actually sourced his oil is he came across a dead deer and extracted the oil from that, and it kind of lasted him the whole year. So what I'm trying to ask is, what is better in this case? Would it be better to use animal products which are local, which don't have the carbon footprint, then actually, like you said,
eat these avocados, but they're not animals, so it's okay to eat avocados, which have been, come from the other side of the world with that carbon footprint, and which deprives other people of that as well. So it's that kind of, if you understand the question. Where's that balance?
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean about being attached to particular labels. I myself was a vegetarian before I became a vegan, and almost, I suppose, sat on a pedestal as high as this and thought, well, there's no meat on my plate, and therefore I'm not causing any harm. And then found out, of course, by being vegetarian, in fact, you're contributing to more harm. You might as well have a steak on your plate. In fact, let me add to that a conversation that I had last week with a farmer at the slaughterhouse when I was there. He said to me, because I see him regularly and he brings his cows to slaughter, out of which in the back of his truck there were 3 dairy cows. Their udders were still full, so they were leaking milk. So there were mothers, still milk was still oozing out of their udders, and yet they were being taken to the slaughterhouse because the milk yield had dropped. But anyway, he said to me quite frankly that in the farming community there is a hierarchy, and dairy farmers are seen as the lowest within the hierarchy because of the suffering caused to those animals. So even farmers acknowledge the suffering within their own communities. But anyway, coming back to your question, is it better to use, because of carbon footprint, is it better to sort of source locally produced items from animals rather than avocados? Well, there is a misconception. Not all vegans actually survive on avocados. And in fact, the carbon footprint of a lot of these things, such as avocados, are not only eaten by vegans, but non-vegans alike as well. But I am a great advocate of also sourcing responsibly and eating sustainably. So, for example, I'm learning more about eating within season. So only eating foods, fruit and veg that is within season. So you're not relying upon, products such as fruit and veg that have been imported and have, acquired thousands of miles of carbon footprint. And even then, the carbon footprint that is acquired through importing things such as avocados still does not, it's definitely not more than what the animal agricultural industry has acquired. In fact, the animal agricultural industry has a bigger carbon footprint than the world's transport sector. So if you just think about the world's transport sector, we're talking about airplanes, trains, buses, cars, and then you've got the animal agricultural industry. The latter still has a higher carbon footprint. So, I mean, that just sort of puts it into perspective for you in terms of eating sustainably, but also looking at what has still a higher carbon footprint.
Joanne, did you want to just add
it is complicated. It's a moral minefield. I mean, I've just got these statistics here. So there's a place in America, in Oregon, where they have river that has to be dammed and used for irrigation. And in 1 year, 58,000 fish died. You think, well, that's because of the river being diverted to grow lettuces or whatever. That's not right. And also, something must die for you to live. It might not be a sentient being, but it might be. It might be a rabbit, vole. Obviously, worms and slugs are not sentient beings, but they have to die for you to live. Something has to die when you churn up the soil. Maybe that's why they're trying to grow meat in a lab, for instance. But it is a bit of a moral minefield once you start thinking about it. But I, for one, would rather have a piece of lamb which is grown in a Welsh mountainside if I'm in Wales for a weekend, rather than eating, products that have been flown right way across the world with pesticides put on them and, all these little animals killed in the field when the field's been churned up by a plough.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to come into an end here. I'm just going to give it over to the speakers for their final remarks. We have just about a minute, so you're going to have to be very concise here, because I'm very conscious about time here. So Lila, we're going to start with you.
Well, the talk of today's talk was, is it a moral imperative or European fad? But to be honest, I think going vegan, it saves our health. It would actually kind of, saves us, but it would also save our environment. It saves, animals, And I think it really saves our humanity. So for me, I think, veganism is not, it's really just a moral imperative, at all levels.
I'm going to keep it really simple. Eat real food, no matter what your health choice or your food choices are, whether fish, meat, vegan, whatever, or low carb, healthy fat. Eat real food. Try not to eat processed food, and don't forget that alcohol and other things influence your health, such as smoking. So just try and lead a healthy lifestyle, but eat real food, not processed.
I'll keep it really short. The majority of people in this room, from what I can see, appear to be Asian, and with the types of foods that we have in our cupboards, from pulses, beans, lentils, rice, veg, fruit, and the spices that we have, from the turmerics to the chili to the cumin, we can make anything tasty, particularly when it's sourced without the suffering that is enlaced in animal type foods. I mean, you only have to think about what a cow goes through to give us the milk, the cheese, the yogurt. You only have to think about a lamb hanging upside down, a baby technically, with its throat slit and bleeding to death before it's chopped up and nicely packaged and wrapped up for the supermarket consumer to buy. To really then think and ask yourself, when you make that choice, where does your moral compass sit, and which way do you look? Where do you want to spend your money? Simple economics. If we demand a different product will be provided.
Thank you. Thank you very much there. And there's one thing I'd like to finally add as well. From a Hindu perspective, essentially we are taught to be optimum individuals, optimum beings, optimum atmas. And that's growth, physical, emotionally, and spiritually. And we look to do that by the gyan that we get and vidya. Something that Dina touched upon, the knowledge that we get. We're engrossed in knowledge, and then what we need to add to that essentially is compassion, karuna. And with that karuna and gyan, I believe that we'll truly be able to practice ahimsa in this day and age. And something very beautifully said was, we are so privileged that we have choice. Now, today, from all sorts of different perspectives, you've just been given more vidya, more gyan. Now, it's now down as us as individuals, the choices we make from today. So thank you. I'm just going to pass it over to Harry.
As always, time has caught up with us, and it is for me to close this event. I hope you found tonight's VM interesting, and the ideas raised by our panel tonight will provide all of us with much food for thought, whether it's vegan or not. VM is all about exploration of ideas. It is not about giving you solutions. We hope we have given you enough information and insight into taking this into your homes, workplaces, and carrying on the month and in your lives. Let me thank our guest speakers and our chair. Please join me in a big round of applause. And last but not least, all of you for attending tonight. And this leads me on to the final point for tonight. I would like to urge you to become a well-wisher. A well-wisher supports us by donating £1 or higher per month for a standing order. £1 per month is less than a cup of coffee, and it would help us as a community to keep the work of VM growing. So if you haven't already become a well-wisher, please, I urge you to go and see the VM team at the back of the room, who will provide all the information that you need to become a well-wisher. And we now also have a card facility available for those of you who may wish to make small one-off donations. Those of you who are already well-wishers, I thank you, and I hope you value the work that we are able to do. We hope you will join us for future events in Manchester, and please like our Facebook page to be kept informed of future events. And please, could you also fill the feedback forms and hand them to the VM team at the back of the room. Good night, everyone, and have a safe journey home.